Hi, I'm Mike Miller, and I hope you're having a great day. Thank you very much for checking out my English teacher videos. I was an English teacher earlier in my career and did tutoring while I was going to college, and I enjoyed trying to help people learn more about the language and writing, whatever it might be. Sometimes a study of grammar helps one to understand the basics of the language, and there are generally considered to be 8 parts of speech in the English language, and nouns and verbs are the most important part of the language. That's what carries the thought through, really. And verbs are action words. They suggest action, something being done. And a noun is the name of a person, place, or thing. And the verb tells what the person, place, or thing is doing. And we use pronouns in the language to refer back to nouns. We just have to be sure that our sentences make sense. There are various ways that sentences can get kind of jumbled up when you're referencing pronouns. When we talk about the antecedent of a pronoun, the word that comes before the pronoun. But so we can talk about that a little bit more, and pronoun number and so on. But as far as writing, like say you have some kind of writing assignment, when you're thinking about verbs, you can use your action words as verbals. Gerund usually is the verb form ending in ing, used as a noun. Participle again ends in ing usually, and serves as an adjective, functions as an adjective, and then the infinitive can be a noun or an adjective or an adverb. The infinitive clause, which usually starts with to, to, before any verb: to run, to walk, to talk. And those verbals many times have objects, and but you just want to make sure that your sentence is clear and understandable. And so if you have a writing assignment, you begin your first draft and you're brainstorming and you're trying to gather ideas and trying to develop your thesis, determine what you want your thesis to be, and many times as you develop the points that you're going to use to develop your thesis, then you'll get going with it. The paper kind of grows as you go, and then when you write your descriptive paragraphs, you can have your introductory paragraph where the thesis is stated, and then in paragraph 2 you would take point number 1 and expand on that. Paragraph 3, point number 2, expand on that, and try to keep a unifying theme going throughout this. And use sensory verbs if possible. We have the action verbs and then also sensory verbs, anything related to the senses, and there are many of those also, many of those verbs. And the more synonyms you know for the more common verbs you use, the more color you can add to your writing and to your oral communication as well. But and so it's a good idea to continue through life to try to learn more words, and there are systematic ways to study words, and I want to do some videos on that as well. But so you're developing a paper, forming an opinion. You might want to point out how you've changed your mind since you started doing research on the paper, whatever it is. You might use cross-examination to gather information, questioning. But just be careful about verbal traps. These really commonly overused expressions, that we hear every day over and over. People just use certain trendy catchphrases over and over. Some words are just really overused so much, you know. And I've seen a lot of this come and go over the years. And you know what I'm talking about. It just probably depends on which part of the country you live in, but around here, awesome is used a lot. Oh, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, when you're writing a paper for a college class, you have to make sure that you use complete sentences generally. We all see fragments like in, you know, in news articles, in magazines. Great writers use fragments in novels that they write, the bestsellers and all those. Fragments sometimes work and sometimes are effective, but generally when you're writing in the academic environment, you want to avoid a fragment. So you want to make sure that each sentence has a subject and a verb. And there are three kinds of sentences, you know, the declarative sentence, just a regular sentence, and then the interrogatory sentence, which is a question. And many times the verb comes first in the question, and then the imperative sentence, which is the command, like to tell somebody to go or to stop, whatever, like when you're communicating with your dog or something like that. Those are generally commands, which the dog may look at as just a question. Do you want to do this? Well, maybe not. But so in formal papers, when you're doing papers in college or beyond that, avoid fragments. Avoid fragments and make sure that you have both a subject and a verb, and that it's not a subject and verb pattern that's introduced by some adverb, like when. When is the most commonly used one. But there's so many of these. Adverbs and prepositions just are intertwined so much, I think. A lot of the words can be used as either, like some of these lists I've put together over the years. Just, after, while, especially, as soon as, since, though, which, whatever, where, as long, once, also, as if, mainly, what. For instance, although, how, for example, because. You just have to be careful about using these. Now, some of these can be used with correct punctuation, like if you use a semicolon after the first independent clause, which has a subject and verb. Then you can use, for example, for instance, and then have comma, and then another subject and verb, and then you've got a compound sentence, and that's correct. That's okay. And many times a compound sentence is better, because if you're trying to really stress an important point, and just having it all within one compound sentence is very effective, you know. And sometimes just simple sentences are very effective. A number of simple short sentences, they're easier to read. It depends on who the audience is. If the audience is your teacher, it's a paper you're just turning into someone who's really well educated on a subject already, you have to write concisely and with enough description, and make sure you don't have fragments. And just about as bad, and won't cost you as many points on your paper, is the run together sentence, which is two independent clauses, two subject verb agreed at the end of the first one. That's a run together. And if you have a comma there, then it's a comma splice. So it's about the same thing. But then that's the important thing, is to make sure that your paper is written with complete sentences, without run-togethers and without comma splices. Double check your papers for that, and without fragments, and that you've used a variety of verbs and appropriate nouns and adjectives to make your writing clear and understandable and informative. But do not overuse the same word unless you have to. Try to find synonyms to make your writing more colorful, more interesting, and so. And some of the words that can be used to separate two independent clauses include moreover, consequently, therefore, however, nevertheless, words like that. And when you analyze a sentence, which are a sentence that's joined with words like that, your ear will lead you toward doing the right thing, and it's good to use these words to connect your sentences, but just be careful about your punctuation. If you do use these and you have an independent clause prior to consequently, then you have to have a semicolon before consequently and a comma after it. The same with therefore, nevertheless, moreover. I've never heard too many people use moreover, but it's always. With any of these, consequently, however, therefore, nevertheless, if the next word is it, he, we, you, I, they, she, then another sentence is probably starting, unless you do not have a verb. But if you have a verb, any kind of action word, any of the sensory verbs, and then the to be verb is am, are, was, were, and been. And then the contractions, don't use too many contractions. And so thanks a lot. I hope you have a great day. Thank you for checking out this video. Thank you for seeking this information, wanting to know more about writing, about being more confident with the written communication that you're required to do at work or whatever it might be. But I hope these videos will help you, and you don't really have to go to college. You can educate yourself. Many people in America and around the world who are very successful don't have college degrees. And so if you can't afford college, don't worry about that. You can still learn whatever you want to learn. And if you want to learn more about writing, there are a lot of resources out there, and it just takes practice. Keep a notebook, journalize whenever you can. That's sometimes very therapeutic. And so, and as you write, as you journalize, just think about what kind of verbs are you using? What are the most commonly used verbs in your writing? When you look back at several pages of writing, you can see verbs and nouns that you tend to use over and over. And how do you start your sentences out? Do you start all of the sentences out with I? Today I did this. I then did this. If all the sentences are like that, it's easy to switch things around. You can change your word order, just analyze sentence by sentence, and you can many times just take some words from later in the sentence and move them to the front of the sentence, and switch the words around and make your writing much more colorful. And so I hope you have a great night. Thank you so much for listening to my videos, and keep a positive attitude, and just realize that you can do whatever you want to do in life. And so have a nice night.